The courtroom was silent, so quiet that I could hear the sound of my own heartbeat. My son Daniel stood on the other side, his eyes cold, his lips pressed together like I was some stranger. I couldn't believe that the little boy I once carried on my back had taken me to court again, for the 5th time. The judge, a tall man with silver hair, looked tired of seeing us. "Mrs. Turner," he said, "this is the 5th case your son has filed against you for disturbing his privacy. Do you have anything to say?" I looked at Daniel, my heart trembling, and said softly, "I only wanted to see my grandson." But before I could finish, Daniel raised his voice. "She spies on us. She comes to our house without permission and questions how we live." Everyone in the courtroom gasped. Then the judge's hammer hit the table once. "Enough," he said. He leaned forward, looked Daniel straight in the eye, and said something that made the whole room freeze. "Young man," he began, "you may have won your battles, but today you are about to lose something far greater than privacy." The words hung in the air like thunder. Daniel's face turned pale, and my knees went weak. I didn't know what the judge meant, but I could feel that something was about to change forever. It all started months ago, after my husband passed away. I lived alone in our old house, the same one where Daniel grew up. I thought we had a good relationship, but things began to change when he married Claire. At first, she was polite, always smiling and calling me Mom. But soon after their son was born, she became distant. I would call to ask how the baby was doing, and she would say they were busy. Sometimes she would ignore my calls altogether. I didn't think much of it until one Sunday, when I decided to visit without calling first. I baked Daniel's favorite pie, apple cinnamon, and walked down the familiar road to his new house. When I knocked, I could hear voices inside, but no one opened the door. I called his name, "Danny, it's Mom." But silence answered me. After a few minutes, I turned the doorknob gently. The door wasn't locked. I stepped inside and saw my grandson playing on the floor. He looked up, smiled, and shouted, "Grandma." My heart melted instantly. But then, Claire came out of the kitchen, her face red with anger. "You can't just walk into people's homes," she shouted. I froze. "I'm sorry, dear," I said softly. "I just wanted to see you all." She stormed past me and called Daniel. When he arrived, his eyes were cold like ice. "Mom, this is not your house. You can't come here without permission again." I thought he was joking. But 3 days later, a letter came to my house. It was from his lawyer. My own son had filed a complaint for trespassing and invasion of privacy. I cried the whole night. The next morning, I went to his office to talk, but the secretary said he was in a meeting. He didn't call me back. I thought things would calm down, but it only got worse. Each time I tried to visit, he would call the police. He said I was harassing his family. I couldn't understand why a mother visiting her child was seen as harassment. The first court case nearly broke me. The judge dismissed it, saying it was a family matter. But Daniel didn't stop. He took me to court again, and again, 5 times in total. Each time he stood there, accusing me of disturbing his privacy, while I stood silently, wondering where I went wrong as a mother. And now, standing before the same judge for the 5th time, I could feel the weight of every tear I had cried. But this time, the judge's voice carried something different, something final. He turned toward Daniel, his expression stern. "You think privacy is more important than respect. But when a man forgets the woman who gave him life, he loses more than privacy. He loses his humanity." The entire courtroom went silent. Daniel's face tightened, and Claire lowered her eyes. I could see tears gathering in the corners of her eyes. The judge sighed and leaned back in his chair. "I will deliver my ruling," he said slowly. "But before I do, Daniel Turner, I want you to listen carefully." And that was the moment everything changed. The judge's voice was calm, but it carried a weight that made everyone in the courtroom sit up straight. "Daniel Turner," he said, "I've seen many cases in my years, but never have I seen a son drag his own mother here 5 times for wanting to love him. You call it invasion of privacy, but I call it a cry from a lonely heart." The whole room went quiet. Daniel tried to speak, but the judge raised his hand. "Don't interrupt me, young man. You have turned your mother's affection into a crime. Have you forgotten the nights she stayed awake when you were sick? Or the years she worked 2 jobs to send you to college? I could feel my hands shaking. Tears welled up in my eyes as I looked at Daniel. For a moment his face softened, but then he quickly looked away. The judge sighed. "This case is dismissed," he said. "And Mr. Turner, I strongly suggest you remember that a house without love is the loneliest place on earth." He banged the gavel. Case closed. People began to whisper, some even clapping softly. I stood there frozen, not sure if I should smile or cry. The words "loneliest place on earth" echoed in my mind. Daniel didn't even look at me as he left the courtroom. I stood there alone, clutching my old purse, wondering how things had become so bitter between us. After the case, I went home to my quiet house. The clock ticked loudly in the living room. The walls seemed emptier than before. I sat in my rocking chair, staring at Daniel's childhood pictures on the wall. There was one photo that always caught my eye. Daniel, age 6, holding a birthday cake, his face full of joy as I stood beside him. I touched the frame gently and whispered, "Where did my little boy go?" A few days later, I got a call. It was Claire. Her voice was low and shaky. "Mom," she said softly. "Can we talk?" I was surprised she called me Mom again. She asked if she could come over alone. When she arrived, she looked tired. Her eyes were red, as if she had been crying. "I'm sorry for everything," she said quietly. "Daniel isn't himself these days. He's under pressure at work. He doesn't mean all the things he says." I offered her tea, and we sat in silence for a while. Then she continued, "He feels like you're judging him, like you think he's not taking care of us well enough. That's why he keeps saying you disturb his privacy. He's scared of failing you." Her words hit me deep. I had never realized Daniel felt that way. All I wanted was to be close to them, to help, to feel like part of their lives again. "I didn't mean to make things worse," I told her. "He's my only child. I just wanted to see my grandson grow." Claire nodded, wiping her eyes. "I know. And he loves you too. But he hides his feelings behind pride." She promised to talk to him, and for the first time in months, I felt a small spark of hope. 2 weeks later, I received an invitation from Claire to attend my grandson's 5th birthday. I couldn't believe it. I baked that same apple cinnamon pie Daniel loved as a boy and wrapped a small toy car as a gift. When I arrived, my grandson ran to me, shouting "Grandma," and hugged my legs tightly. My heart filled with warmth. Even Daniel smiled faintly when he saw me, though he didn't say much. We all sat down to eat, and for a moment, it felt like old times. The laughter, the smell of food, the sound of children playing, it was peaceful. I thought maybe, just maybe, the storm had passed. But as I stood up to clear the dishes, Daniel's phone rang. He stepped aside to take the call. When he came back, his face had changed. His eyes were cold again. He looked straight at me and said, "Mom, we need to talk." Now. The room went quiet, and I felt my heart drop. I could tell something bad was about to happen again. Daniel's tone was sharp, and it cut through the laughter like a knife. Everyone turned quiet. Claire looked uneasy, and even little Tommy stopped playing with his toy car. I followed Daniel outside to the backyard, where the cold evening air brushed against my skin. The silence between us was thick, heavier than it had ever been before. He finally spoke. "Mom, why did you tell Claire about what I went through as a boy? About how hard our life was after Dad died?" I blinked, confused. "Daniel, I didn't tell her anything bad. She asked how I managed when you were young, and I only told her we struggled but made it through. That's all." He ran a hand through his hair, clearly frustrated. "You always do this. You make me look weak. I'm a man now, Mom. Stop talking about the past like I'm still that little boy you had to save." His words stung more than I wanted to admit. I stared at him, trying to hold back tears. "I didn't mean to embarrass you. I only wanted her to understand how much you've grown." But Daniel wasn't listening. His pride had closed his ears. "You always have to be in the middle of everything. You don't respect my privacy, my space, or my family boundaries." My voice trembled. "I only came to celebrate your son's birthday, Daniel. You invited me back into your life, remember?" He sighed and turned away. "It was Claire's idea, not mine. And now I regret it." Those words broke me. My chest ached, and I could feel my knees weaken. I had raised him alone, loved him with all my heart, And here he was, regretting that I was even there. I wanted to scream, but instead I whispered, "One day, Daniel, you'll understand what it feels like to be shut out by your own child." He didn't reply. He just walked back inside, leaving me standing alone in the dark. When I got home that night, I cried for hours. I felt like a ghost in my own son's life. Days turned into weeks, and I didn't hear from him again. Then one morning a letter came in the mail, another court summons. My hands shook as I opened it. Daniel was suing me again for repeated emotional disturbance and invasion of privacy. I dropped the paper and gasped. How could my own son take me to court again after everything? I hadn't even visited or called since the birthday party. It made no sense. I felt dizzy. My heart beat faster as I sat down, clutching the paper. I thought it had to be a mistake, but when I called the number listed on the letter, the secretary confirmed it. "Yes, Mrs. Turner," she said politely. "Mr. Daniel Turner filed a complaint against you last week." I couldn't believe it. My tears fell freely as I whispered, "What did I ever do to deserve this?" The day of the hearing came. I wore my best dress, the same one I wore to his graduation many years ago. I wanted to remind him that I was still the same mother who cheered for him, who believed in him. When I entered the courtroom, he didn't even look at me. He sat with his lawyer, cold and silent. The judge, the same one who had dismissed the last case, looked surprised to see us again. "Daniel Turner," he said slowly. "You're here again? Didn't we already discuss this matter?" Daniel nodded stiffly. "Yes, Your Honor, but she won't stop interfering in our lives. She keeps calling. She keeps asking questions about our home." "That's not true." I interrupted before I could stop myself. "I haven't called in weeks. I didn't even know he changed his number." The judge sighed deeply. "Mr. Turner, this is no longer a legal issue. It's a family tragedy. You're using this court to punish your own mother, and it's shameful." Daniel clenched his jaw. "I'm only protecting my family." The judge stared at him for a long time before saying, "And what are you protecting them from? Love? Compassion? Or the truth that you've become a stranger to the woman who gave you life?" The courtroom fell silent again. Daniel looked away, his face tight with anger, but his hands trembled slightly. I could tell the judge's words struck him deep. Then suddenly, Daniel slammed his hand on the table. "You don't know her," he shouted. "You don't know what she's like when no one's watching." The judge raised his voice. "Enough, Mr. Turner." But Daniel didn't stop. "She's not innocent. She's hiding something too," he yelled, pointing at me. Everyone gasped, and the room filled with whispers. I froze, staring at him. My heart pounded. What was he talking about? The judge leaned forward, frowning. "What do you mean, Mr. Turner?" Daniel's eyes burned with something between anger and pain. "Ask her about the letter she hid from my father before he died. Ask her what she didn't want him to know." The whole courtroom went still. My breath caught in my throat. That was a secret I thought I had buried forever. The judge's eyes shifted to me, sharp and searching. The courtroom was so silent that I could hear the ticking of the clock above the door. My heart pounded so fast I could barely breathe. "What letter is your son referring to, Mrs. Turner?" the judge asked in a calm but firm voice. I froze. My hands trembled as I held the edge of the wooden table. I didn't want to speak. Not there, not in front of strangers. But Daniel's eyes were burning into me, demanding the truth. It was nothing important," I whispered. Daniel laughed bitterly. "Nothing important? That letter was from Dad's company. He was supposed to get a job overseas, his dream job. You hid it because you didn't want him to leave you. You made him stay and suffer in this small town until he died miserable." Gasps filled the courtroom. I felt weak, my knees almost giving out. The judge raised a hand to silence the room. "Is that true, Mrs. Turner?" Tears rolled down my cheeks. I nodded slowly. "Yes, I hid the letter. But not because I wanted to hurt him." "Then why?" Daniel's voice cracked with fury. "Why would you ruin his life like that? He died thinking he was a failure." I covered my face, unable to look at him. "Because he wanted to take you away with him, Daniel. He said he couldn't raise a child in another country alone. And he wanted a divorce. I was scared of losing you. I thought if he stayed, our family would stay together." Daniel's mouth fell open. For the first time he didn't have anything to say. His anger melted into confusion and pain. The judge sighed heavily. This is a sad story of fear and pride on both sides. A mother's fear of losing her son, and a son's pride that blinds him to love. I looked at Daniel through my tears. I'm sorry, son. I should have told you the truth long ago. I made a mistake, but I never stopped loving you. Every choice I made, right or wrong, was out of love. Daniel looked away, his jaw tight. He didn't say a word. The judge decided to adjourn the session for a short break. As he left the bench, I sat back, my heart heavy but strangely lighter now that the truth was out. I went to the ladies' room to wash my face. When I looked in the mirror, I saw an old woman who had carried too much pain. Behind me, I saw Claire standing quietly. She stepped closer and said softly, "Mom, I didn't know." "I didn't want you to," I replied, wiping my face. "Some truths only bring more pain." She held my hand. "He's hurt, but he'll come around. He just doesn't know how to forgive yet." Her words gave me a bit of comfort. I returned to the courtroom, but Daniel wasn't there. The judge was already back on the bench, looking concerned. "Where's your son?" he asked. Claire looked around nervously. "He said he needed air. He went outside." Minutes passed, then 10, then 15. The clerk went to check the hallway, but came back shaking his head. "He's gone." The judge frowned. "We can't proceed without him." I felt my chest tighten. I hurried out of the courtroom, my eyes scanning the parking lot, the corridors, everywhere. Then I saw him standing by the steps outside, staring at the sky, his shoulders shaking. I walked up slowly. "Daniel," I said softly. He didn't turn around. "I don't know what to feel anymore, Mom. My whole life, I blamed Dad for being unhappy, and now I find out it was you. Everything I thought I knew feels like a lie." Tears streamed down my face again. "You have every right to be angry. But please remember, I loved you more than anything. Maybe too much." He turned to me then, his eyes full of pain and confusion. "I wish you had trusted me with the truth." Before I could reply, a loud voice called from behind us. "Mr. Turner, the judge is calling for you." Daniel nodded without looking back. He wiped his face quickly and walked toward the courtroom. I followed, my heart pounding with fear of what might happen next. When we entered, the judge looked at Daniel with a grave expression. "Mr. Turner, before I give my final words, I want to remind you both that this court is not a place to destroy what family remains. It's a place to heal if you let it." He paused, then leaned forward. "But I must say, Mr. Turner, I have never seen such cruelty disguised as justice. What you've done to your mother, this endless punishment, stops today." Daniel lowered his head, ashamed. The judge's next words, however, made everyone in the courtroom gasp. "From this day forward," the judge said firmly, "you will be the one held responsible for all emotional damages caused to your mother. You sought to silence her, but it is my duty to make sure her voice is heard. And your conscience will never silence it again." Daniel looked up in shock. And just like that, the judgment that would change both our lives forever began. The judge continued in a voice that filled the entire courtroom. "Daniel Turner, this court cannot ignore the pain you have caused through your repeated lawsuits. Therefore, you are ordered to undergo family counseling for 1 full year, and to provide care and financial support for your mother during that period. You will meet weekly until this relationship is mended." The entire courtroom erupted in murmurs. Daniel's face went pale. "What? You can't force me." The judge's gavel struck the table hard. "Quiet. I can and I will. The law can't make you love your mother, but it can make you take responsibility for what your pride has destroyed." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My tears flowed freely as I whispered, "Thank you, Your Honor." The judge looked at me kindly. "Mrs. Turner, this court recognizes your patience, but I urge you two to forgive. You've both lived too long with old wounds." Daniel sat down slowly, his eyes on the floor. The silence stretched until he finally said in a trembling voice, "I didn't know about the letter. I thought you were just trying to control me. I didn't know you were scared." I reached across the table and touched his hand. For a second he didn't move. Then, like a child again, he gripped my fingers tightly. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said quietly. I let my anger blind me. I forgot who you were to me. The judge smiled faintly. Then this court has done its job. Afterward, as we walked out of the courthouse, the cold breeze brushed past us. Claire and Tommy were waiting outside. The little boy ran to me, wrapping his tiny arms around my legs. "Grandma, are you okay?" he asked. I smiled through tears. "Yes, sweetheart. Grandma's okay now." Daniel stood beside me, silent, watching us. Then, for the first time in years, he said the words I'd been longing to hear. "Come home with us, Mom. Please." That single sentence broke the wall that had stood between us for so long. I hugged him tightly, feeling the warmth of forgiveness flood through me. Claire joined in, and for a moment, it felt like our family was whole again. As we walked to the car, the judge stepped out of the courthouse and called out, "Mrs. Turner." I turned around. He smiled kindly. "Remember, love isn't about who's right or wrong, it's about who chooses peace." I nodded, my heart full. That night, as I tucked Tommy into bed at their house, Daniel stood quietly in the doorway. He whispered, "You know, Mom, the judge was right. His final words, they'll stay with me forever." I looked at him and said softly, "Sometimes, it takes losing everything to learn what truly matters." He nodded, his eyes glistening. And for the first time in a long time, he called me Mom with love again. The house was silent, but it wasn't empty anymore. It was filled with something we both had forgotten: peace. Life lesson. Love and pride cannot live in the same heart. Sometimes, it takes the truth, pain, and forgiveness to remind us that family should never be fought in court, but healed in love. If you were that mother, would you forgive him? Tell me in the comments below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful grandma stories that touch the heart.